Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're slipping behind the silken curtains of the Mughal Empire, not into the throne room or the war tent, but somewhere quieter, darker, and infinitely more suffocating. You won't be wielding power or even choices. Tonight you are a harem slave, dressed in embroidered gauze, perfumed within an inch of your life, and officially categorized as ornamental property. You've been bought, renamed, and relocated to a palace. You're technically not allowed to leave. Your job? To exist beautifully and silently until someone decides what happens to you. Before you start romanticizing candlelight and peacock feathers, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy drifting off to the sound of lost identities and systemic cruelty. Let me know in the comments what time it is for you and what corner of the world you're listening from. There's something weirdly soothing about knowing we're all falling asleep to the quiet horror of history. Now close your eyes, breathe deep, and prepare to live a life where the walls are velvet, the smiles are knives, and survival means never being noticed too much or too little. You don't remember much about the day you became property, just that it was hot, loud, and over fast. The kind of day where the air clings to your skin like wet fabric and everything smells like sweat, smoke, and the sour tang of fear. Maybe you were walking home with a jug of water on your head. Maybe you were already asleep when the door burst open. Maybe someone you trusted was the one who pointed at you when the men came asking. The details blur. What stays sharp is the feeling, the sense that your life, as you knew it, ended not with a scream, but with a transaction. Maybe you were sold outright. Your family didn't mean to do it, not really. But the rains failed, the crops failed, and eventually, everything else failed too, including the idea that keeping you was better than feeding your brothers. Maybe they told themselves you were going to be a maid in a nice house, that you'd be safe, even respected. Maybe they didn't ask questions. Or maybe they just closed their eyes. The silver coins clinked into a calloused hand, and that was that. You were 13, give or take, old enough to understand that your name had just been traded for a price, but still young enough to hope, foolishly, that things might work out. Or perhaps it was more abrupt, a raid. Armed men on horseback, faces wrapped in cloth, shouting in a language you barely recognized. They herded people like cattle, grabbing the strong, the pretty, the unlucky. You were bound, dragged, pushed into the back of a cart with other girls, some crying, some praying, some already numb. That first night was the longest one of your life. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. No one came looking for you. No rescue, no search party, no mother clawing at the gates of the fort demanding her child. Just the sound of wheels creaking through the dark, pulling you deeper into silence. What followed was a blur of movement, one holding compound after another, dim, crowded places that stank of old bodies and stale food. Men poked and prodded at you, not with cruelty exactly, but with the detachment of someone assessing a goat at market. You were bathed in cold water, oiled like meat, and inspected by women who used the word defects with clinical ease. One noted a scar on your arm, another lifted your hair to examine your scalp, one measured your hips and made a disappointed clicking sound. None of them asked your name. Eventually someone decided you were worth transporting. That was the word they used, transport, not send or escort it, just transport, as if you were a bale of cloth. A letter arrived with a seal you couldn't read. An official stamped a ledger. You were tagged, documented, and bundled with a group headed east. You didn't know where exactly. Just that the guards grew more polite, and the scenery more gilded the farther you travelled. Villages became towns, towns became cities, temples gleamed gold in the distance, the rivers widened, and so did the gap between what you used to be and what you were becoming. On the road you met others like you, girls of every shade and shape, speaking dialects that melted together into one long string of confusion. Some had been taken from distant kingdoms. Some had been born in slavery and never known otherwise. A few, the rare few, had been servants in noble households before being gifted to the empire as diplomatic offerings. You learned quickly not to ask too many questions. Curiosity made people disappear. Better to mimic the quiet ones, the ones who bowed often and never made eye contact. By the time you reached the imperial outskirts, you understood two things. First, no one was coming to save you. Second, the more beautiful everything looked, the more dangerous it probably was. The roads were lined with carved stone elephants. The city gates towered like mountains. You passed gardens so perfectly manicured they didn't look real. Fountains that sparkled with scented water, and courtyards paved in marble. The palace itself loomed ahead, less a building and more a declaration. Every brick whispered power, every window watched. You were herded past the main gates, not through the grand arches, but through a narrow shaded entrance, used by servants and animals. You understood the message, loud and clear. This place was magnificent, and you were not. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The noise of the city fell away. The air smelled of sandalwood, rose oil, and something harder to name, a kind of bitter stillness. You were handed over again to women in elaborate veils and rigid expressions. They didn't smile, but they didn't sneer either. They'd seen too many girls like you. One of them handed you a fresh set of clothes, sheer muslin, dyed pale blue, delicate enough to tear with a sneeze. Another told you your new name. It wasn't a suggestion. No one told you what you were. Not exactly. They use words like attendant, companion, courtwoman, but none of it mattered. You knew. You weren't here to serve tea or recite poetry. You were here to wait, to be beautiful, to be pleasing, to be chosen. Maybe not today, maybe not ever, but that was your purpose now, to exist in a gilded box until someone opened the lid and decided what to do with you. That night, you slept on a mat in a shared room with 7 others. The walls were painted with faded lotuses. A carved screen let in moonlight, but no air. One girl sobbed into her sleeve. Another whispered prayers under her breath, in a language you didn't recognize. You stared at the ceiling, willing your body to disappear and your mind to go anywhere else. You failed on both counts. The next morning you woke to bells, not the pleasant kind, not temple bells or festival chimes. These were routine bells, the kind that meant stand up, line up, don't speak. And just like that, the palace swallowed you whole. Before you even know where you are, you're naked and being judged like a mango at a market. Not metaphorically. You are literally standing in a line with 10 other girls, stripped bare under the open scrutiny of strangers, who regard you with all the warmth of grocers sizing up bruised fruit. There is no privacy, no curtain, no pretense of dignity, just cold marble under your feet, the sting of oil still slick on your skin, and a queue of officials moving slowly down the row, muttering to one another like you're a stack of account ledgers that won't quite balance. The woman with the writing tablet doesn't look up at your face. She circles you like she's inspecting a statue for cracks. She makes a humming noise when she sees your collarbone. Not because it's beautiful, just prominent. A note is scribbled. Next comes the teeth check. A gloved hand tilts your chin up and pries your mouth open. Someone peers in, counts silently, taps a tooth with a fingernail. You're told not to flinch. You flinch anyway. More notes are taken, something about your teeth being adequate, not great, not bad, just adequate. You're already learning that in this place, adequate is almost a compliment. Your skin is poked, pinched, pressed in places no one should ever touch without permission, which of course you're not allowed to give or withhold. One woman squints at a freckle near your hip. Another frowns at a tiny scar on your thigh. A goat kick from when you were 5, if anyone cared. They don't. The scar is recorded in the inspection ledger as a minor imperfection, unlikely to affect placement. Placement, like you're a decorative vase being assigned to the right room. Then come the measurements: hips, waist, wrists, ankles, each noted down with a speed that makes it clear they've done this many, many times. There is no good measurement. There is only fits the preference of the moment. Some emperors liked their women petite. Others preferred curves. Still others wanted someone unusual. It doesn't matter how your body looks to you. It matters how it will be received by someone you haven't met and might never speak to. Your body is now a resume, and you don't even know what job you're applying for. At one point, a man enters. Not old, but not young either. His robes are fine, his hands are soft, and everyone straightens slightly as he walks in. He doesn't speak to the girls. He doesn't have to. He's here to approve the documentation, or amend it if your appearance doesn't match the initial description. He glances at you once, pauses, then says, "Mark her as Indo-Persian, not Rajput. The features are closer." You want to ask what that means, but your tongue stays still. You've already figured out that curiosity isn't rewarded here. Neither is speaking. When it's over, someone hands you a thin garment, sheer muslin, barely more than a suggestion of fabric, and tells you to dress quickly. There's a faint smell of camphor in the room. It burns your nose a little. The other girls are already being herded toward a second chamber. You follow because that's what you do now. You follow. Always. The next room is quieter, dimmer. There are cushions on the floor and ornate lattice windows letting in filtered light. But don't let the decor fool you. This isn't a place to rest. This is the categorization chamber, the step between being inspected and being assigned a role. The roles, as you're about to learn, are numerous, but none of them are yours to choose. There are musicians, dancers, perfume bearers, attendants, companions, bathmaids, and of course concubines. A word they rarely say aloud, but one that hovers over everything, like a scent you can't wash off. An older woman with too much eyeliner and a voice like gravel sits cross-legged on a dais and calls names from a list. Not your real name, of course. The new name you were given yesterday. The one that means nothing to you but everything to them. She glances at each girl as she's called and makes small remarks. Too shy, bath service. Pretty face, not graceful. Perfume runner. Tall, confident, possible for music training. When she gets to you, she pauses longer than you like. Her eyes scan you from toe to crown. Then she murmurs, mixed features, good cheekbones, possible exotic status. We'll see. You don't know what exotic means in this context, only that it's said with the kind of voice one might use to describe an interesting pet. You're not sure if that's better or worse than being labelled plain. Either way, you're separated into a smaller group, ushered into a new hallway, and told you'll be reassessed by specialists tomorrow. Apparently, even your category requires subcategories. Bureaucracy loves you now. You're fascinating on paper. That night, you're given a spot to sleep in a room with women who don't speak much. Some of them look older, in their 20s. Some seem almost blank, like they've turned the lights off inside. You try to ask one what exotic actually means. She looks at you for a moment, then says, "It means they don't know where else to put you yet." Then she turns over and pretends to sleep. You do the same, but your mind doesn't cooperate. You lie awake staring at the carved ceiling, wondering what box you'll be filed into next. Wondering if there's a way to make yourself unnoticeable without disappearing entirely. Wondering how long it takes to forget your own name. In the days that follow, you're prodded by dancers, sniffed by perfume mistresses, and asked to hold poses while someone watches from behind a beaded screen. Everyone is searching for something: poise, expression, uniqueness. But no one is looking at you. Not really. They're looking for what they want to see. Your body is a suggestion. Your presence is a placeholder. Your life, such as it is, now lives inside a column of ink next to a numbered line in an imperial registry. You are no longer a girl. You're a designation. By the time they finally stamp your papers and assign you quarters in the Zenana proper, the part of you that resisted has gone quiet. You're not resigned. Just archived. Someone will come for you eventually, to train you, to dress you, to position you for your eventual presentation. Until then, you wait in silken silence, catalogued, sorted, and almost, but not quite, erased. The red fort gleams in the sunlight, not that you're allowed to enjoy the view. You saw it once, briefly, from a distance as the caravan approached. Towering walls of red sandstone, intricately carved balconies, domes that shimmer like they're holding back heaven itself. The kind of architecture that makes men feel silent and women feel small. But you didn't enter through the ceremonial gate, the one lined with marble elephants and guarded by soldiers in peacock-feathered turbans. That path is for emperors, envoys, and favoured sons. You came in through the servants' way, a side corridor that smells like damp stone and boiled lentils, guarded by a eunuch who didn't bother to look up as you passed. They don't announce your arrival. There is no fanfare, no audience, just a quiet transfer of paperwork and a brisk ushering through halls so vast and cool they seem to echo with lives more important than yours. You glimpse beauty in fragments, an inlaid fountain here, a painted ceiling there, always through the corner of your eye, never long enough to admire. You're not here to admire anything. You're here to be admired, eventually, someday, if you're lucky. For now, you walk with your head down, following a woman in layered veils who says nothing and expects the same in return. You enter the Zenana, the women's quarters, like a ghost passing into another world. Yeah, the sounds change first. No more boots on stone, no shouting guards, no echo of distant court debates. Just the soft hush of slippers, the faint tinkling of anklets, the low murmur of women pretending not to care who just arrived. The air is different too, heavier, scented with jasmine, rosewater, and the constant, humming anxiety of 100 women trapped in luxury. You are told, firmly and without ceremony, that this is your new home. It is not a request. It is not a discussion. The Zenana is enormous. It is also invisible, not in the literal sense. There are walls, gardens, chambers, and countless attendants, but in the way it exists entirely out of sight from the rest of the palace. You're not meant to be seen by men outside the imperial family. Most men in the palace will never lay eyes on you. You will move like wind through courtyards, staying behind screens, walking shadowed routes designed to keep you hidden. You could live here for decades without ever crossing the threshold of the audience hall. That is the point. You are both treasure and secret. Valued, yes, but only as long as you remain unseen. Your new quarters are beautiful, in the way a jewel box is beautiful when you're the thing being locked inside it. The walls are painted with delicate vines and birds. There's a small courtyard outside your room with a fountain that whispers all day long. You are given bedding finer than anything you've ever touched. Small trays of fruit, a bronze mirror, and a servant who tells you what time you're expected to wake, bathe, and stay quiet. The room is yours, but it isn't. You're allowed to decorate it, but only within approved limits. You're allowed to rest, but only when told. You're allowed to be yourself, provided yourself fits into the palace's idea of what a courtwoman should be. The irony is that for a place built on beauty, the Zenana has a way of making everything feel dull. Time flattens. Every hour feels the same, stretched thin by repetition. You rise to bells. You bathe under the supervision of attendants. You are powdered, oiled and braided until your body feels less like your own and more like a project someone else is in charge of completing. You are led to meals where no one speaks above a whisper, and afterward you walk the gardens in pairs, always in pairs, never alone. There is no alone here. Not really. Someone is always watching. even if it's just the architecture. You begin to learn the rules, mostly by breaking them. The wrong colour worn on the wrong day gets you a warning. Sitting in the wrong section of the dining hall earns a whispered reprimand. Gossiping too loudly results in a night of kitchen duty, peeling onions until your fingers wrinkle and your pride stings. The punishments are quiet, like everything else here, but they add up. Enough small missteps and you might find yourself transferred to less favourable quarters, or worse, marked as difficult. No one wants to be difficult. Difficult girls are forgotten. And yet, despite the restrictions, there is a strange sort of hierarchy at play. Not all women here are equal. Some are wives of the emperor, first, second, third, and so on. Others are his concubines. A few, the rare few, are widowed queens from past reigns, quietly kept out of the way. Then there are the attendants, the entertainers, the needle workers, and the slaves, like you. Each rank has its own privileges and perils. You begin to notice how some women walk taller than others, how certain veils are trimmed with gold while others are plain. You learn quickly to keep your head down around the heavily perfumed ones. They have power. You have potential. Those are not the same thing. You catch glimpses of the outside world now and then. A passing hawk overhead. A servant mentioning the latest political intrigue. The sound of drums from a distant festival. But for the most part, the palace walls are as much psychological as physical. You could walk 5 miles inside this place and never see a street, never hear a market, never touch dirt. The empire exists beyond the walls, but for you, it might as well be another planet. You're in the most resplendent prison imaginable, surrounded by silks and spices and polished marble, and it will never feel like home. Sometimes, when you're alone at night and the other women are sleeping, you sit by the lattice screen and stare at the moon. You try to remember what the sky looked like when you were free. You try to picture your old village, your family, the feeling of running without permission. But the memories slip away, one by one, like coins dropped into a fountain, swallowed by the very beauty that now keeps you captive. And even then you still wonder if maybe, just maybe, you could find a way to matter here, to rise, to be chosen. Because no matter how invisible the Zenana makes you, the dream of being seen never fully dies. It just dims. There are fountains, peacocks, silk pillows embroidered with threads so fine it glitters like gold dust. Your slippers are made of soft velvet. Your drinking water is chilled with snow carted down from the mountains. At first glance, the harem looks like a dream someone had after falling asleep on a bed of silk and rose petals. But you learn quickly, the harem is not a dream. It's a performance, a theatre with no stage, no audience, and no intermission. You are both actress and prisoner, and the script was written before you were born. The gardens are manicured within an inch of their lives. Every tree is pruned into obedient symmetry, and the flowers bloom on schedule like well-trained pets. You stroll past them during your assigned walk times, always in designated pairs or small groups, never alone. Even in paradise, solitude is suspicious. You're told it's for your safety, but everyone knows that's not entirely true. The real reason is simpler. If you're alone, you might plot. Or worse, you might think. There is no privacy here, not even in your own mind. Your quarters may be yours in name, but they are checked. Your letters, if you're allowed to send them, are read. Your gifts, if you're given any, are inspected. The eunuchs pass through the halls with eyes that see too much, and tongues that report even more. The older women, the ones with seniority and secrets, sit like silent sentinels in the corners of rooms, pretending to nap while listening to every whispered word. If you're clever, you learn to speak in code. If you're wise, you don't speak at all. There is a hierarchy, but it's not the kind you can see on a chart. No one wears labels. Instead, power shows itself in the tilt of a head, the weight of a glance, the seating order at meals, Some women rise through beauty, others through cunning, a rare few through art or intellect, and some, the most dangerous kind, rise simply because they know how to disappear until it's time to strike. You learn to recognize them quickly. They're the ones who smile with their eyes closed. Officially, the harem is organized with military precision. There are departments, roles, schedules. Dancers belong to the entertainment wing. Maids are managed by the senior concubines. Musicians rehearse under court-appointed instructors. Even the eunuchs have their own hierarchy, and they answer to no one but the emperor himself. Every moment of your day has a purpose. You wake to the sound of bells, perform your ablutions in ritual order, eat a strictly timed breakfast, and then are assigned tasks based on your rank and training. One day, it's flower arranging. Another, it's music. The illusion is that you're being cultivated. The reality is that you're being prepared, like a dish or a poem or a trap. Despite all this structure, life in the harem is a constant tightrope walk between competition and pretense. Friendships exist, of course, but they are always fragile, always calculated. You might share secrets with someone one day and find them repeated the next, slightly altered, strategically placed. Everyone is trying to rise, everyone is trying not to fall. It makes for a delicate dance, one where smiling too much can be suspicious and smiling too little can be seen as arrogance. You learn to perfect the neutral expression, calm, attentive, faintly deferential, a face that could mean anything and therefore means nothing. Gossip is the bloodstream of the harem. It travels faster than food, louder than music, and cuts sharper than any blade. Someone is always pregnant. Someone else is rumoured to have caught the emperor's attention. A third has vanished, officially due to illness, unofficially because she crossed someone richer, prettier, or more useful. The stories change with each telling, but the warning never does. Don't be too clever. Don't be too slow. Don't be too anything. Extremes get noticed, and notice is dangerous. Even beauty is a double-edged sword. Yes, it's your primary asset, the currency that gets you favours, jewels, attention, but it's also a liability. Being beautiful means being envied. It means other women watch your every move, waiting for you to slip. It means the older concubines look at you like a reminder of their own fading appeal, and the younger girls see you as a threat before you even speak. You are constantly performing, constantly polishing yourself like a mirror. But heaven help you if you shine too brightly. Punishment is rarely formal. The real tools of discipline are silence, exclusion, and reassignment. One day you're invited to a music lesson with the favoured women. The next day you're demoted to laundry duty with the attendants. No explanation, no recourse. You'll hear about it through someone else's sigh or the pointed absence of an invitation. If you complain, you're difficult. If you don't, you're weak. It's a system designed to break you not with force, but with confusion. Occasionally, someone does break. A girl stops speaking or laughing or eating. She begins walking in circles in the courtyard, reciting poetry no one taught her. She starts smiling at walls or crying during embroidery. And then one day, she's gone. The official word is usually illness, something sudden, something tragic. But you know the truth. The harem doesn't kill you with poison. It kills you with slow erosion, until you forget who you were before you became someone else's property in silk. Still, there are rare moments of joy. A joke shared between girls when no one is listening. A good dream that doesn't vanish by morning. A music lesson where you almost forget where you are. A night when the moonlight hits the marble just right, and for a second the whole palace feels like it belongs to you. These moments are fleeting, fragile, and dangerous to desire, but you cling to them anyway, because in a place where you're constantly watched, constantly weighed, the smallest rebellion is remembering you still have an inner life at all. And so you move through the days like a figure in a tapestry, graceful, quiet, ornamental. You learn to survive not through strength, but through stillness. You hold your breath when others speak. You offer nothing that can be used against you. You wait. Because here, in the gilded cage of the harem, power doesn't shout, it whispers. And you are learning to listen. Your training begins before you realize that's what it is. It starts subtly, like everything else in the harem. A correction here, a whispered suggestion there. At first, you think you're just being scolded for walking too loudly or using the wrong kind of greeting, but soon it becomes clear. Your every movement, every word, every silence is being molded. You're no longer just a resident of the palace. You are raw material, and someone somewhere has decided you need refinement. Someone teaches you how to bow, not too deep, not too fast, graceful, but not dramatic. A bow that says, "I honor you," without groveling. Then someone else teaches you how to smile, not with your teeth, heavens no, but with your eyes. A smile that suggests warmth without invitation, elegance without enthusiasm. You are told that a good court woman smiles only when appropriate, and never so much that it could be mistaken for joy. Joy, you see, is not your job. Your job is to be pleasing. Court etiquette is an endless ocean of rules. There are phrases you must say, and others you must never utter. Certain greetings are reserved for nobility, others for eunuchs, and still others for women above your rank, which, as you've gathered by now, is most of them. You learn which foot to step forward with when entering a room. You learn how to sit with your legs angled just so, how to incline your head to convey deference without looking subservient, how to serve tea with both hands, and absolute silence. Everything you thought you knew about existing in your body is reprogrammed. You're not just learning to behave, you're learning to perform. The arts are part of your instruction too, of course, not the kind that win awards, but the kind that keep you alive. You're taught to sing in a soft, lilting voice that's never louder than the rustle of silk. You're given poems in Persian to memorize, verses about longing and beauty and the moon, written by men who never lived in cages like yours. You recite them in dim rooms to instructors who nod or frown or adjust your pronunciation without ever telling you if you're doing well. Feedback is rare. Perfection is expected. Dance lessons are the most difficult, not because they're physically demanding. They're not. The movements are small, controlled, elegant, but they require a kind of submission you're not used to. Every motion is meant to suggest allure without excess. You're told that to be truly seductive, you must move as if your body contains secrets no one is allowed to touch. The irony, of course, is that your body isn't yours at all, but you learn the steps anyway. One slow turn, one graceful arm, one practiced glance downward. You learn to become the idea of a woman, even if you no longer remember what it's like to feel like one. Then comes the subtler education, the kind you never asked for but cannot avoid. You learn how to read a face before it speaks. You learn to spot the shift in a eunuch's eyes that means he's having a bad day and might take it out on you. You learn how to compliment a superior without seeming desperate, how to pretend not to hear an insult that could cost you status, how to nod at something you find abhorrent because protest isn't just futile, it's dangerous. You are learning diplomacy, but on a scale that leaves no room for mistakes. The stakes aren't promotions or embarrassment. The stakes are your future. You're also taught to be clean, impossibly, obsessively clean. Your nails are scrubbed daily. Your hair is oiled, braided, and inspected. Your skin is exfoliated with paste that smells like crushed almonds and stings like jealousy. There is a ceremony to your grooming, a rhythm to your maintenance. You are being sculpted, quite literally, into something palatable. And all the while, you are expected to be grateful for the attention, grateful for the privilege of being shaped into someone else's vision of perfection. No one asks how you feel during any of this. Feelings are irrelevant. If you cry, you're called delicate. If you protest, you're called unruly. If you smile too much, you're called simple. There is no right way to be, only wrong ways to be noticed. So you learn to shut your emotions off, like a lamp before dawn. You tuck your anger into a drawer behind your ribs and replace it with posture. You swallow your grief and chase it with rosewater. You teach your face to look calm even when your thoughts are screaming. Some days you almost forget what you're being trained for. The routines are so detailed, the corrections so endless, that it starts to feel like this is the goal, to be perfect, polished, finished. But then the instructors mention things, subtle things, how to apply perfume to the wrists and neck in a way that makes the scent linger just long enough to be remembered. How to sit on a cushion with your spine straight and your chin lowered, so that the curve of your neck is visible from across the room. How to laugh softly, like wind in the leaves, so that if someone powerful happens to walk by, they might be intrigued. That's when it hits you. This isn't finishing school, it's auction prep. No one says it outright, that would be unseemly, but the implication is always there, hanging in the room like incense smoke. You are being readied, polished like a gemstone, but only so someone else can wear you. You're being prepared for the possibility, the hope, even, that the emperor might notice you someday. Or a prince. Or a visiting noble who wants to make a politically strategic request. You might be given as a gift, like a bottle of rare wine, or a clever bird in a gilded cage. Someone will claim you. It's just a matter of when. Until then, you keep learning. You practice silence. You rehearse submission. You become so still inside your own mind that sometimes it scares you. Because deep down, you wonder if the training is working too well. If one day you'll wake up and there won't be anything left of the girl who used to laugh too loudly, walk too fast, or speak without permission. You wonder if, by learning to please, you've forgotten how to want. And that thought, more than any of the rules, is what truly makes you obedient. They say the eunuchs are your protectors. This is not comforting. Protection, in this place, is never freely given. It's wielded, bartered, or dangled like a threadbare umbrella in a storm. Technically available, but only if you're useful, invisible, or amusing enough to warrant it. The eunuchs guard the Zenana, not for your sake, but for the emperor's. You are, after all, valuable cargo. And valuable cargo needs to be kept under lock and surveillance. They hold the keys, literally and figuratively. They open the gates in the morning. They close the corridors at night. They decide who gets escorted to the courtyard and who stays inside for her own good. They control access to the outer world, and sometimes, more crucially, to the inner one. A friendly eunuch might relay a message to a superior on your behalf. A displeased one might let your name slip into the wrong conversation. They don't yell or strike usually. Their power is quieter than that. They ruin you with silence or a glance, a well-placed pause, a slow turn of the head. You were warned early on. Never anger a eunuch, not just because of their power, but because of their memory. They remember everything. Who insulted them, who ignored them, who begged too often or spoke too casually. And while their status technically puts them outside the harem's rank-based hierarchy, they operate their own system. The favourites get soft treatment, the troublemakers get delays, missing messages, cold food, or convenient misunderstandings that somehow always seem to work against them. There is no formal complaint process. There is only survival. Some of them are kind, genuinely kind even. An older one with tired eyes might pause to ask if you've eaten. A younger one might smuggle a rose into your quarters after seeing you cry. These moments of humanity are rare and not to be trusted too easily. Kindness in the Zenana often comes with strings, and sometimes those strings are invisible until they're wrapped around your throat. Still, you take what you can get. A soft voice here, a shared joke there, anything that makes the bars feel less cold. Most, however, are not kind, not cruel either, not openly, just efficient, detached, practiced in the art of ignoring your discomfort because it isn't their concern. They were brought here young, many of them, some by force, some by arrangement. Their mutilation made them safe in theory. In reality, it made them loyal to the system that gave them power in exchange for personhood. They patrol the halls not just as guardians, but as reminders. This is what happens to men who get too close. This is what happens to people who serve the palace with everything, including their bodies. You don't speak to them unless spoken to. That's the rule. It's not always enforced, but it's always present. If one speaks, you answer, politely, quickly, and without trying to be clever. You don't make jokes, you don't flirt, you don't ask personal questions. You never, ever assume familiarity, no matter how many times you've seen the same face walking the same corridor. Because one misstep, one overly familiar word, could be interpreted as arrogance. And arrogance in a place like this is dangerous, no matter who you aim it at. They carry messages, and the best ones know how to make those messages walk faster, linger longer, or vanish entirely, depending on the politics of the day. If you want a note passed to a superior, a eunuch is your only option. If you want news from outside the harem, about the court, the empire, your family, or even the weather, a eunuch will decide whether or not you're allowed to hear it. They are the gatekeepers of information, and information is the most precious currency in a place that trades in silence. Some of them spy openly. They sit near conversations pretending to nap or tidy something. They report back to the senior women, or in more serious cases, to imperial advisors. You know who they are, but you can't avoid them. No one can. The best you can do is make yourself boring in their presence, unmemorable, agreeable. There's no reward for being clever. The harem does not need clever girls. It needs obedient ones. There are stories, of course, stories about eunuchs who climbed to incredible heights, wielded enormous influence, even whispered in the emperor's ear. These stories are always told with a mix of awe and fear, because a eunuch who has the emperor's ear can ruin a woman with a sentence, one fabricated accusation, and you're reassigned to the laundry chamber, or worse, sent to the remote quarters for the difficult ones. You know at least 2 women this has happened to already. Neither of them smiled much to begin with. Now they don't speak at all. You try not to think too hard about the reality of their bodies, the absence that defines them. Some girls joke about it behind closed doors, nervous laughter over stolen mango slices, but even the laughter feels uneasy, like a candle flickering in a draught. It's not the physical difference that unsettles you. It's the fact that the palace has turned that difference into power. That mutilation is a qualification. That suffering has been forged into authority. And that the system, once again, rewards those who have given up the most by giving them control over others who had no choice at all. Still, over time, you find ways to navigate them. You learn which ones appreciate courtesy and which prefer indifference. You memorize which ones carry gossip and which ones merely listen. You know who delivers food, who announces visitors, who guards the hallway outside your bath. These details become part of your mental map, a quiet survival skill, like knowing where to stand when it rains. You don't trust any of them, not really, but you learn how to exist around them, how to avoid drawing attention, how to become just another compliant figure, moving through the palace like furniture with good posture. And in a strange way that becomes your shield. Obedience, simplicity, routine. You create a version of yourself that the eunuchs don't mind. Quiet, respectful, predictable. You let them think you're dull, unambitious, harmless. It's exhausting, but it works. Because as long as they're not talking about you, they're not targeting you. And in the Mughal harem, sometimes the best you can hope for is to be ignored by the people who have the power to ruin you. There are hundreds of women here. Technically, they're all your sisters. Realistically, they're your competition. You're told the harem is a sisterhood, a place of female solidarity, where the emperor's women support one another in beauty, grace, and shared devotion. This is the official line. It is spoken with serene faces and scripted smiles by the senior concubines and repeated by the trainers and attendants, as though repetition makes it true. But even on your first day, you see it for what it is, a lie too polite to challenge out loud. The women here are not your sisters. They are rivals wearing the same perfume. Everyone smiles, but no one means it. Everyone compliments, but there's always a bar buried in the sweetness. You're told you look lovely in that colour, but perhaps something darker would hide your hips better. You're praised for your singing voice, followed by a sigh about how hard it is to find true talent in the younger generation. There is no trust in the Zenana, only alliances of convenience and enemies dressed as confidantes. Some of the women are breathtaking, and they know it. Others are clever, or charming, or dangerously quiet. Every trait is weaponized. You start to notice the way certain women linger in hallways just long enough to catch a passing nobleman's glance through a carved screen. You see how others always seem to be near the older, influential concubines, laughing at the right moments, offering jasmine tea with perfect timing, whispering jokes that make no one but the listener smile. They are playing a game you barely understand, but you know enough to recognize the stakes. Rise and you might gain privileges, silk instead of cotton, fruit instead of porridge, a real mattress instead of a mat. Fall and you'll find yourself invisible. The favoured concubines float above it all, like gilded ghosts. They don't bother with the small competitions. They have already won. You can recognise them by the gold trim on their veils, the polished pearls in their ears, the way others clear the hallway when they approach. They don't speak much. They don't have to. Their power is assumed, like the sun rising. They've been chosen by the emperor, maybe once, maybe many times. Whether or not he remembers their names now is irrelevant. What matters is that he did, once, and in a place where everything revolves around proximity to power. That memory is enough to keep them dangerous. The attendants are a different kind of threat. They don't have silk veils or jewelled bangles, but they have ears everywhere. They carry information, like oil in a lamp, silently, dangerously, ready to ignite. Some are ambitious, hoping to rise in status. Others are just bitter, resigned to never catching a noble eye, and determined to punish those who might. You try to be polite to them, not friendly. Friendly gets misinterpreted, but polite enough to avoid being noticed for the wrong reasons. A cup of water here, a compliment there. All calculated, all necessary. Then there are the real vipers, the women who smile too much, who offer to braid your hair while slipping casual questions into the conversation, who suggest you wear a specific necklace, only for you to learn later that it's considered mourning jewellery. These women are patient, strategic, and often bored, a deadly combination. The palace gives them nothing to do except compete, and so they do. Endlessly, ruthlessly. Every minor victory, a better seat at the evening gathering, an extra portion of pomegranate seeds, is savoured like a military conquest. And every slight, real or imagined, is remembered. Gossip is the main weapon. It travels faster than any messenger and hits harder than any slap. You learn quickly that what's said about you matters more than what you actually do. One rumour, well placed, can sabotage a reputation beyond repair. Perhaps you are seen speaking to the wrong eunuch. Perhaps someone claims they heard you mocking a superior. Perhaps your sudden cough is interpreted as a sign of illness, and suddenly you find yourself reassigned to quarters closer to the laundry courtyard. No explanation, just silence and consequences. You develop instincts. You learn to read a room before stepping fully into it. You glance at faces not to admire them, but to calculate. Who is seated where? Who is whispering to whom? Who avoids your eyes? You learn to manage your expression with the precision of a diplomat. Too cheerful, and you're naive. Too serious, and you're cold. Too quiet, and you're suspicious. It is a daily performance, one where forgetting a single line might cost you everything. And yet somehow there are moments that resemble genuine connection. Not friendship exactly. The harem is not built for that, but something gentler. A girl helps you fix your hem before a ceremony. Another leaves an extra piece of sweetmeat in your dish without a word. You exchange glances with someone across the courtyard after a particularly pompous speech by a superior, and both of you stifle laughter. These small mercies are never acknowledged aloud. To admit them would make them vulnerable, but they are real, and they matter more than you'd like to admit. Sometimes you catch yourself forgetting to be on guard. You laugh too freely. You share a memory. You let your posture relax. It feels good, dangerous, but good, like stepping out into the sunlight after too long indoors. And then something happens. A whisper circles, a cold look from someone you trusted, a task reassigned without explanation. And you're reminded, yet again, that this place does not forgive vulnerability. It feeds on it. Every so often, a woman disappears. You ask where she went. The answers vary. She was reassigned. She fell ill. She was married off to a distant noble. None of the answers ever sound convincing. Her quarters are emptied. Her name fades from conversation. A new girl arrives, younger, quieter, already being measured up by the rest. The cycle continues. You survive it by not caring too much, or at least by pretending not to. This is the sisterhood you were promised. A garden of daggers hidden behind silk curtains. A place where every smile is a chess move and every compliment is a test. You are not here to be loved. You are here to outlast the women who want what you want. And if someday you rise, if you gain favour, rank, protection, it won't be because you are kind. It will be because you are careful. You've been bathed, perfumed and painted. Now you wait. You're not told why or when. You're just informed quietly that you are to be made ready. No explanation is offered, but the implication hovers in the air, dense and inescapable. It's your turn, or at least your chance. A eunuch hands you a fresh set of silks, finer than usual. Someone arranges your hair into a style that hurts your scalp, but makes your cheekbones look more imperial. Your wrists are dusted with sandalwood. Your eyes are lined with coals so precisely, it feels like a form of branding. And then, once you're properly transformed into a decorative object, you are placed in a room and told to wait there until someone calls for you, or doesn't. There's no protocol for this moment, no ceremony, just a sickly mixture of anxiety and perfume. The other women pretend not to notice. Some avoid your gaze, others offer you that familiar, not quite smile that means nothing and everything at once. You sit still, back straight, hands folded, like a statue of someone who never existed. You try not to sweat. You try not to breathe too loudly. You've been taught how to appear serene, even when your heart is galloping in your chest. This is your only tool now, the illusion of calm. The emperor doesn't see many women, not directly at least. His presence is both omnipotent and absurdly distant. For most of the women in the harem, he is a concept more than a person, the axis around which everything turns, even if his face is only glimpsed once every few years. But sometimes he requests company. Sometimes a concubine is summoned. Sometimes a girl is chosen. No one knows the method. Maybe he sees you in passing through a lattice screen. Maybe someone recommends you. Maybe your name simply comes up on a list, prepared by someone else entirely. The system does not explain itself. It only demands obedience. Being chosen might seem like a prize, and it is technically. If you're noticed, you might rise. You might be gifted jewellery, a new title, better quarters. You might receive silk instead of cotton, mangoes instead of rice, a servant instead of silence. Your name might be spoken with a new tone, respect, envy, or calculated politeness. You might even, if things go precisely right, be summoned again and again. Eventually, You might be elevated to a position of real power. You might bear a child. You might earn a permanent place in court politics. But being chosen is also a risk, a dangerous, irreversible one. Because attention is a flame, and you're made of lacquered paper. One wrong word, one misplaced glance, one poorly timed remark, and the same man who elevated you could just as easily cast you aside. If you fail to please him, or bore him, or remind him of something unpleasant, you might be forgotten entirely. If you offend someone else in the process, a rival concubine, a political ally, a cousin with influence, you might be punished in ways the official record doesn't mention. Not all women who are chosen are heard from again. And then there's pregnancy, the hidden trap inside the golden cage. A child can be your salvation or your doom. A son might guarantee you protection, even status, but it might also make you a threat. A pregnant concubine becomes the subject of scrutiny, envy, and, if the timing is wrong, suspicion. Is the child really the emperor's? Is it politically inconvenient? Is it something someone else wants to make disappear? More than one woman has mysteriously miscarried after being assigned new food tasters, and no one asks too many questions. Not being chosen doesn't feel much better. It's not a dramatic fall, just a slow, steady slide into obscurity. You are still fed, still clothed, still technically part of the emperor's harem. But your name drops off the guest lists. You're no longer called to recite poetry. The good fabrics skip your quarters. People stop glancing at you in the corridors. You begin to feel like furniture that someone forgot to move out. After redecorating, you still exist, but not in a way that matters. Your usefulness fades and no one tells you when it's officially gone. You just know, because the lights don't quite reach your corner anymore. The worst part is that you have no control. No strategy guarantees success. No amount of polish ensures favour. You can be the best trained, best dressed, best prepared girl in the palace and still be passed over for someone newer, or paler, or simply more convenient. You've heard of girls who trained for years, learned to play 3 instruments, mastered Persian couplets, memorised the history of Mughal emperors, and were never chosen. You've also heard of girls who tripped during their first presentation and still became favourites. No one understands the logic, and if they do, they're not sharing it. After a few days, when your moment doesn't come, no summons, no word, no invitation, you're quietly told to resume your normal duties. No explanation is given. You're not dismissed, just reset. The special silks are taken back. The perfumes are replaced with your usual rose water. You go back to embroidery lessons and quiet meals, and the art of pretending you don't care. But the silence hangs over you, thicker than the coal that still hasn't washed off entirely. You weren't chosen, not yet, maybe not ever. Some women spend years waiting for a second chance. Others give up entirely and try to build small empires within the harem itself. Social influence, little privileges, a personal following. Some turn cold and sharp, carving power out of proximity rather than attention. Others simply disappear into the rhythms of palace life, neither favoured nor forgotten, just part of the backdrop. You haven't yet decided which path you'll follow. For now, you sit quietly in your quarters and remind yourself to be patient, not hopeful. Just patient. There's no winning here, only slightly slower forms of losing. The harem teaches you that quickly. Whether you rise or fade, whether you're chosen or ignored, whether you bear a son or vanish before your time, none of it belongs entirely to you. Your fate belongs to whims you cannot influence, decisions you'll never hear discussed, people you'll never meet. You're not a person here. You're a possibility. And in the palace, possibilities are cheap. You're pregnant. Congratulations. Now everyone wants you dead. It's not a joke, it's not even an exaggeration. You'd laugh if you weren't so exhausted. You've barely had time to process it yourself. 1 missed cycle, then 2, then the quiet confirmation whispered by a palace midwife with downcast eyes. and a voice so soft it might have been an apology. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a few words, a sharp inhale, and suddenly your life has changed in the kind of way that doesn't feel real until the consequences start piling up behind your ribs. At first you feel pride, a flicker of it anyway. After all, you've been noticed, chosen, claimed. There are women in the harem who have lived and died without ever being summoned to the emperor's side. But you've carried his attention in your body, and now you carry something more. A child, possibly a son, possibly a future prince, possibly your only shot at becoming more than a decorative memory in silk. But the pride fades quickly, crushed beneath the weight of what you now represent. Because a pregnancy in the harem isn't just personal, it's political. A child means inheritance, and inheritance means power, and power means you've officially become a threat. Not to the emperor necessarily. He'll likely forget your name again in a few weeks. But to everyone else, you're a walking hazard, a shifting piece on the chessboard, a potential queen born from the body of a pawn. The women around you notice first. They always do. They notice the sudden visits from the physician, the way your meals change, the soft glow of oil on your skin, the extra cushion beneath your seat. They smell the pregnancy on you before you ever say a word, and they do not congratulate you. They smile, of course, because smiling is the language of enemies here. But behind the smiles are calculations, questions. How far along is she? Will the emperor acknowledge the child? Is it a boy? And if it is, how do we make sure it never matters? Servants begin to act differently. Some are gentle, even protective. A cup of warm milk offered at night. A careful glance before handing you a tray. Others withdraw, afraid of being caught too close to a storm they didn't cause. One stops talking to you altogether. Another begins stirring your food more conspicuously, as if to remind you it's been checked, or to make sure you notice when it hasn't. You start eating slowly, testing every bite with the suspicion of someone who has read too many cautionary tales. Sleep becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. You lie down, but your mind stays up, wide awake, tracing the outline of every possible danger. The jealousy of other women, the ambition of eunuchs with too much access, the quiet hatred of those who were once considered for favour and now watch you from the shadows, resentful of your swollen belly and the attention it brings. You sleep with one hand on your stomach and one ear tuned to the hallway, listening for footsteps that sound too deliberate. The midwife tells you to rest. She says, stress is dangerous. She says you should stay calm, stay cool, eat soft fruits, and speak only when spoken to. You nod, you smile, but inside you're building a fortress out of fear and instinct. Every day, you ask yourself the same questions. Who benefits if you vanish? Who gains if your child doesn't survive? And how many ways are there to make sure that happens without ever being caught? There are stories, of course, whispered late at night, in corners where even the shadows seem to lean in and listen. Stories of women who lost their children under strange circumstances. One slipped on a staircase, another drank bad milk, one simply never woke up. No one investigates, no one accuses. The palace is good at making things disappear. People, questions, the truth. And pregnancy doesn't make you special. It just makes you vulnerable in a more interesting way. You begin to realise just how fragile your position is. One moment of illness, and you're reassigned to less favourable quarters for your comfort. One disagreement with a superior, and you're called unstable. You're told to focus on your health, but what they mean is, stay out of the way. Stay quiet. Don't attract more attention than you already have. Attention is dangerous now. You are a potential mother of an imperial child. You're also a liability wrapped in silk. If the emperor sends for you again during this time, it's a mixed blessing. It means you haven't been forgotten. It also means you're still a player in a game you didn't ask to join. The other women watch more closely. They take notes, they adjust their strategies. Some grow colder, some grow friendlier, which is worse. You learn to dread kindness as much as cruelty. At least cruelty is honest. When the pregnancy starts to show, there's no more pretending. You walk differently, you breathe differently, you move through the harem like a living rumour. Every gesture is interpreted, every glance analysed. You begin to see your future narrowing into 3 possible paths. 1, the child is born and it's a boy, and the emperor acknowledges it. You are elevated, protected, at least temporarily. 2, the child is born and it's a girl. Your usefulness is reconsidered. You are quietly forgotten. 3, the child is never born. A tragedy, a relief, a message. You don't let yourself dream of the first option. Not because you're cynical, but because hope is heavy, and you already have enough weight to carry. Instead, you focus on surviving the day, eating cautiously, speaking sparingly, moving carefully. You stop looking in mirrors. You start praying more, not to be favoured, just to be left alone long enough to deliver whatever is growing inside you. You don't know if it's a child or a verdict. It hardly matters. The palace was never safe, but pregnancy makes it feel like every wall has grown teeth. Every hallway hides something sharp. You walk past fountains and marble carvings and realise none of it was ever meant to make you feel comfortable. It was meant to impress those with power and to distract the rest of you from noticing how little you have. And still, in the middle of it all, you feel something strange, a flutter inside you, a movement that isn't yours, proof that something else is alive in this beautiful, terrible place. And for one brief second you feel something close to defiance, not hope, not joy, just the stubborn realization that you're still here, still breathing, still walking the marble floors of a palace built to break women like you. And maybe, just maybe, that matters. Your body changes, the palace doesn't. Either you survive this, or you vanish trying. Pregnancy is one kind of uncertainty. Childbirth is another. No matter how many oils they rub on your skin, or how carefully they spoon-feed you crushed almonds and saffron milk, the fact remains. Giving birth here is less a sacred rite and more a high-stakes gamble, one you never agreed to play. The palace can orchestrate festivals, command armies, and carve entire walls from marble, but it cannot guarantee that you or the thing inside you will make it out alive. As your stomach grows, so does the silence around you. Fewer people look you in the eye. The eunuchs get quiet. The midwives become gentle in a way that feels rehearsed. No one says it aloud, but you start to understand. You've reached the part of the story where outcomes are split into 2 folders: survives and becomes useful, or dies and is replaced. You try not to wonder which one they've penciled your name into. Labour comes without warning, as if your body finally gave up waiting for safety. You are moved to a different room, a cooler one, they say, with better airflow. It is quiet, tucked away, far from the courtyards where laughter still happens. The only people allowed near you now are the midwife, an older attendant who doesn't speak unless asked, and 2 eunuchs outside the door who never blink at the same time. You don't see your friends, you're not sure you have any left. The pain is not poetic. It doesn't come in waves like the stories say. It comes like fire, blunt, unstoppable, ancient. You scream once, maybe twice. After that, you're too tired. You grip something, a sheet, the air, the edge of yourself, and you hold on. You don't think about the emperor. You don't think about titles or silk. You think about surviving. You think about not dying in a room that smells like rose water and blood. If the child is born alive, you hear crying. If not, you hear nothing. And nothing is worse, because in the nothing, you have to pretend. Pretend it's for the best. Pretend it wasn't a boy. Pretend it didn't matter. But it did. Even if it was just for a moment. even if it lived only long enough to remind you that your body once tried to make something permanent in a place that doesn't allow permanence. If it's a boy and he lives, your status shifts, quickly, unnervingly. You're moved to better quarters. People speak to you differently. You're watched again, but not in the old way. This time, it's the wary attention reserved for women who might be important later. You're invited to court events. Though you're seated far from the front, you're called mother of now, not just by your name. It's better, but not safer. A son is a shield and a target. If he lives, your job is to protect him from the system that made him. And that system starts with the harem itself. If it's a girl, you are praised softly and then left alone. Girls are polite disappointments. You're told she's healthy. That's something. You hold her briefly, then less often. She is taken to a different section of the palace, where she will be raised by someone else, and reminded daily that her worth lies in who might want her someday. You ache, but not out loud. And if the child doesn't live, for whatever reason, official or whispered, you aren't given time to grieve. The palace folds the event into itself, like a flaw in the marble. You're returned to your quarters. Your special dishes disappear. The silks are boxed up. People resume speaking to you as if nothing ever happened. You bleed quietly into your bedding for days. You stare at the ceiling and realize that in the imperial court, not all deaths are visible. Some vanish along with the people who cared about them. You survive. That's what matters. At least that's what they tell you. And maybe you even believe it. You were valuable once. Now you're 26. You know this not because anyone tells you directly, but because the signs begin to appear with quiet finality. There's no announcement, no ceremony marking your decline. It simply happens, slowly, then all at once. A missed invitation, a smaller cushion at dinner, a new girl assigned to your old place in the perfuming chamber. No one calls it demotion. No one needs to. You feel it in the way people stop pretending you're still being watched. The mirrors are less kind now. You don't look old, not really. Outside the palace walls, 26 is young, full of promise, full of time. But inside the Zenana, time works differently. Youth is not a phase, it's a currency. And like all currencies, it depreciates. There's a new girl whose laughter is louder than yours used to be. Her skin hasn't seen years of perfumed oils and constant scrutiny. Her eyes haven't dulled. The eunuchs remember her name. You can't quite recall when they forgot yours. You used to rise with purpose. Now you rise because habit keeps you from staying in bed. The routines haven't changed, but your place in them has. You used to be part of the preparation teams. Recitations, dance, poetry, silk selection. Now you spend your mornings embroidering quietly, or walking the outer gardens, where no one goes unless they have nowhere better to be. You haven't been summoned in over a year. The anticipation you once clung to has curdled into something else. Not disappointment exactly, but an ache you carry like a familiar shawl. No one says you're being pushed aside. Instead, they say you're being honoured with rest, that you've earned time for reflection. What they mean is that you've become furniture, well maintained, still lovely, but ultimately stationary. Your body has changed, not dramatically, but enough. A few lines at the corners of your eyes, a softness in places that once held tension. You don't bother with kohl every day now. No one's paying attention. You could paint your face like a festival mask, and not a single eunuch would bat an eye. You try not to envy the younger women. They're still playing a game you've already lost, though they haven't realised it yet. You watch them from the colonnade, laughing, manoeuvring, whispering strategies over mango slices and henna bowls. You recognise the hunger in them, the ambition disguised as obedience. You remember when you used to walk like that, not faster, just with more meaning, as if every step might bring you closer to being seen. The harem has a way of erasing you without removing you. Your meals still arrive, but they're simpler now. The sweetmeats come less often. Your clothes are still cleaned, but with less care. Your silks are swapped for softer, plainer fabrics. Comfortable, forgettable. You're no longer included in discussions about seasonal dances or royal banquets. You overhear them now, from the hallway, as you pass by on your way to nowhere in particular. Some women your age find new roles. They become teachers, mentors, overseers of the younger ones. They wield small authority, giving them just enough purpose to mask the loss of relevance. Others retreat entirely into religion or silence, or whatever version of invisibility best fits their nature. A few become bitter, their voices sharp, their smiles brittle. They hover near doorways and speak too loudly. You pity them, but only because you see yourself in their shadows. You've thought about leaving, not the palace, that's impossible, but leaving the game, accepting the slow fade into background. It's tempting, in a way. There's peace in obscurity, no expectations, no rivals. You could spend your days reading poetry, tending to the herb garden, perhaps even teaching the newer girls how to walk without tripping on their veils. But then you remember how long it took you to climb, how carefully you were trained, how many times you smiled when you wanted to scream, and a part of you resists the idea of surrendering completely. There are moments of strange freedom, though. No one watches you anymore, which means you can finally breathe. You don't have to posture. You don't have to pretend. You can sit in the shade for hours without being summoned, sleep through the heat of the day, eat without worrying about crumbs on your lips. There's a kind of dignity in irrelevance, a gentler rhythm, a quieter world. You're not competing anymore. You're surviving. Still, you miss being seen. Not desired necessarily, just acknowledged, remembered. You catch glimpses of yourself in reflective glass and wonder when your face became unfamiliar. You ask a eunuch a question and watch him hesitate before answering. You sign your name on a registry and realize you haven't heard it spoken aloud in weeks. You used to be a person. Now you are a role that no longer needs filling. Sometimes late at night, you remember what it felt like to be 20. The nerves, the hunger, the shimmer of hope in your chest that this might lead somewhere meaningful. You remember how tightly you clutched that hope, even when it cut you. And now, with distance, you see it for what it was, not foolish, but doomed from the start. You were taught to believe your value was temporary, and now you are living proof. But you're still here. You wake up, you move through the corridors, you offer polite nods to women who no longer care who you are. You arrange flowers in a bowl and admire how they look just before they wilt. You read poems you've memorized a dozen times and find new meaning in them. You hum lullabies you never got to sing to a child. You exist, quietly, softly, still. And in a way, that's its own defiance. You have not disappeared, not entirely. You remember who you were. You carry it with you like a secret, not because it matters to them, but because it still matters to you. You were someone once. You still are, even if the palace has forgotten. There are 3 exits from the harem. None of them are nice. They don't tell you that when you arrive. They speak of service, of refinement, of duty and honour. They speak of the emperor's favour and the protection of the palace walls. But no one mentions how it ends. Not really. You're too young at the beginning to ask and too afraid by the middle to bring it up. But as the days grow quieter, as the doors close earlier, as the smiles around you tighten, the truth becomes harder to ignore. This place does not let women grow old without a plan for their removal. The best outcome is promotion, if you can call it that. If you're clever, observant, politically cautious, and still useful in ways that don't threaten anyone more powerful than you might be given a new role. A lady-in-waiting to a younger concubine, a stewardess of the inner kitchens, an administrator over fabric allocations or ritual preparations. You become a fixture of palace logistics, still inside the gilded cage, but tasked with running it from behind the veil. It's not glamorous, It's not particularly dignified, but it's safer than the alternatives. These roles come with small privileges: a private chamber, control over a staff of servants, the right to give quiet instructions without bowing first. Some women thrive in these positions. They reinvent themselves as silent authorities managing harem life with a surgeon's precision. Others cling to the job because it's the only identity they have left. Either way, it's a form of survival. You stay useful, and in return, you are allowed to continue existing. If you're lucky, and that word is doing a lot of heavy lifting, you might be married off to a courtier. This isn't the fairy tale version of marriage, with doves and blessings, and a groom who looks at you like you matter. It's a transaction, plain and cold. A man in his 40s or 50s, maybe a low-ranking bureaucrat, maybe a retired military officer, petitions to marry someone from the harem. He doesn't choose you specifically. He submits a request for a wife with modest training and no active political entanglements. Your name is pulled from a list. If no one objects, the match proceeds. You are given a modest dowry, a few silks, a set of copper pots, perhaps a small servant girl, if you were once highly ranked. The wedding itself is perfunctory: a blessing, a contract, a meal. Then you're sent away. Not far, usually, just outside the palace walls, maybe to a lesser mansion in the city or a rural estate you've never heard of. You're no longer a concubine, no longer a court woman. You are a wife, which sounds like freedom until you realise it's just another form of service. And yet some women adjust. They grow vegetables, they have children, they attend temple. They live out the rest of their days in relative quiet, occasionally remembered by those still inside the Zenana as the one who got out. You wonder sometimes if it's envy you feel when you think of them, or relief, or something bitter and smaller than either. The third option is the one no one talks about, but everyone knows. It happens quietly, usually at night. A woman vanishes. Her quarters are reassigned. Her belongings are boxed up and redistributed. A vague explanation is given: illness, a family emergency, a reassignment to a distant court. No one believes it, but no one questions it either, because questioning implies you noticed, and noticing is dangerous. Sometimes you hear whispers before it happens. Someone insulted the wrong official. Someone was caught in a forbidden affair. Someone had a secret that turned inconvenient. Sometimes there's no warning at all. One day she's at breakfast, the next her seat is empty. Not just physically, completely, as if she never existed. The eunuchs say nothing. The senior women glance away. The younger ones take note. Disappearance is not always death, not officially, but what difference does it make? Once you're gone, the palace swallows the space you left behind like water closing over a stone. No ripples, no memory. The silence is the point. It reminds everyone else what the rules are. And what happens when you stop being useful, obedient, or invisible? You try not to think about which exit is waiting for you. You tell yourself there's still time, that perhaps you'll be made an assistant to someone important, or that a minor noble will request a wife, and you'll be seen as appropriate. But in your quieter moments, you wonder if your path was chosen long ago, if your name has already been penciled into someone's list, if you'll hear footsteps outside your quarters one night. And no, still you go through the motions. You attend meals, you recite prayers, you offer polite advice to the younger women when asked. You keep your head down, your voice soft, your expectations low. You try to look useful without looking ambitious. You try to seem helpful without drawing attention. The balance is exhausting, but necessary, because the palace does not reward fatigue. It punishes visibility, and it forgets you even faster. You dream sometimes of walking out, of opening the gates and stepping into the city barefoot, veilless, unmarked. You dream of a life where your name belongs to you, where your choices matter, where silence isn't your native language. But dreams in the harem are like rain in the desert, romantic, rare, and quickly swallowed by the dust. So you wait. Not for freedom, not for redemption, just for the final verdict, for the decision you won't get to participate in, for the ending someone else writes for you. And when it comes, whether it's a quiet appointment, a forced marriage, or the sound of soft sandals in the hallway at midnight, you will bow your head, gather your belongings, and go. Because that's what you were trained to do. From the very beginning. That's just how the empire works. You die as quietly as you lived. There is no grand farewell, no procession, no weeping chorus of silk-draped mourners, no gilded tomb bearing your name. Your passing is not an event, not even a disruption. It's just something that happens, a detail, an administrative note, a body to be cleared before the afternoon meal. In the Zenana, death isn't rare, it's routine, and routine things don't warrant ceremony. Maybe it's illness, something slow and ordinary, a cough that lingers, a fever that refuses to break, a vague tightness in your chest that no one has time to investigate. You're told to rest, you're given warm milk, a midwife visits once, then doesn't return. By the time someone notices that you're not rising for prayer, your hands are cold. It's nobody's fault officially, just a sad inevitability. You were old, they'll say, not in years but in usefulness. Or maybe it's childbirth. Again, a last desperate chance to matter. A younger man, a fleeting favour, a body too tired to survive it this time. The women gathered around your mat are not friends, just staff. They follow the script. Boil water, offer cloth, whisper prayers. But their eyes stay dry. They've seen this before. You scream once, maybe twice. Then your body does what it must or doesn't. Either way, you fade between contractions, swallowed by the same silence that once consumed your name. And then, of course, there's the third possibility. The one everyone knows but never says. Not a sudden illness, not a tragic accident. Just a cup of tea that tastes a little off. A fruit that was left sitting too long. A powder in your ointment. You were fine yesterday. Everyone said so. And now, you aren't. The eunuchs don't ask questions. The other women don't speculate. The senior attendants nod grimly and say, "She was fragile." And that's that. Maybe you die in your bed. Maybe you collapse in the bath. Maybe you slip quietly behind a curtain and don't return. Wherever it happens, the result is the same. Your quarters are cleared. Your belongings are reassigned. The younger girls peer into the empty room and wonder how long it'll be before someone else is moved in. Not long. Space is always in demand. The palace is many things, but sentimental is not one of them. If a servant finds your body, she might call for someone, or she might wait a moment. Take a breath. Close your eyes gently before disappearing down the hall. She's not being cruel. She's being cautious. Reactions are noted here, and grief, and especially for someone like you, can be interpreted as disloyalty. Better to stay quiet. Better to let the system do what it does best. Forget. Your name is written down once more, not in honour, but for the sake of inventory. There will be a record somewhere, a line in a ledger. Deceased. Quarters reassigned. Assets redistributed. No family is notified. If you had family once, they stopped existing in the palace's eyes the day you stepped through its gates. You belong to the emperor now, and now you belong to no one. There is no grave, not for someone of your rank. Your body is wrapped, taken out before dawn, and placed with the others. Other women who faded before you, other names erased, other lives whittled down to a bundle of fabric and silence. A prayer is said. Maybe. A eunuch signs off on the disposal. Then it's over. Not tragic, not remarkable, just done. And the palace moves on. The bells ring for breakfast. The attendants sweep your room. The new girl who's been waiting for better quarters is moved in by noon. She looks around, touches the walls, doesn't ask who lived there before. Why would she? Everyone knows that asking questions in the Zenana is a fast way to join the list of women no one remembers. The women who knew you don't speak your name, Some forget it out of habit, others forget it on purpose. 1 or 2 remember your face, a detail, a laugh, a line of poetry you used to recite. But they tuck the memory away where no one can see it. Because grief here is private. Not because of respect, but because of fear. The harem doesn't encourage remembrance. It encourages efficiency. And so they move forward, the same way you once did when someone else disappeared. You are not missed, not loudly, not officially, but maybe, in a quiet moment, someone lights a small lamp and looks at it longer than necessary. Maybe a poem is whispered in your rhythm. Maybe someone avoids your old spot under the neem tree for a few days. These things matter, even if they're invisible, especially because they're invisible. Mourning in the harem isn't loud, it's survival coded, and so that's how it ends. Not with betrayal or justice or fanfare, just a slowing heartbeat, a quiet breath, a final moment when the light falls across your sleeping mat and you're no longer there to notice. You die as you lived, behind a curtain, beneath a name not your own, in a place that was never really yours. But if there's a mercy in it, it's this. You lasted. You endured a system built to devour you slowly, and you made it further than many. You were a girl once, barefoot and frightened, then a concubine, then a mother, then a shadow, then gone. That is not nothing. That is history, the kind written in margins and whispers, the kind that survives not in monuments, but in the memory of what it felt like to keep walking long after the world stopped looking. And somewhere in the corners of the palace, in the stone you once touched, in the thread of an old shawl, in the cracked tile near the fountain where you like to sit, something of you lingers. Even if no one remembers why, your name is gone. Your story is not. There are no portraits of you, no records bearing your full title, no scrolls describing your life in tender prose. You are not commemorated in stone or stitched into royal banners. There is no pavilion with your name carved into marble, no fountain named in your honour, no carefully preserved letters tied with silk ribbon. The official histories make no mention of the women like you, and even if they did, your name would be an alias, a pretty pseudonym given for convenience, for sorting, for forgetting. Still you lived, that much is undeniable. You breathed the same scented air as queens. You walked the same halls where emperors plotted and poets whispered verses into the dusk. You existed in a world gilded and brutal, ornamental and unrelenting. You wore silk so fine, they dissolved in water. You learned to recite couplets and hold your gaze just low enough to be desirable, but not defiant. You were part of an empire that recorded everything. Its conquests, its dynasties, its favoured sons, and somehow managed to forget you anyway. But your absence is a kind of presence too. The spaces between the records, the unexplained line items, the anonymous designations in ledgers, the footnotes about attendants, household women, unnamed concubines, that's where you are. Not invisible, just unacknowledged. Like dust in sunlight, always there, just not the focus. You were not alone in that fate. You were one of hundreds, maybe thousands. Lives reduced to collective nouns and passive verbs. Women who served, belonged, accompanied, passed. The historians didn't ask who you were. They didn't care whether you loved anyone, whether you wrote poems you never shared, whether you sang lullabies into the dark, even when there was no child to hear them. They didn't ask how you got here, whether you were taken, given, sold, or born into it, whether you ever dreamed of something else, a home, a family, a name spoken with affection instead of protocol. Those weren't considered historical questions. Just noise, just the soft, forgettable sounds of women breathing under empire. And yet, your life was real, unromantic, undramatic, but real. You felt hunger, you felt hope, you felt fear so constant it became part of your pulse. You navigated a system designed to break you, and you made it through, not untouched, not triumphant, but intact enough to matter. That matters, even if no one wrote it down. The palace never intended to preserve you. It preserved its architecture, its relics, its myths, but not its women. Not fully. Occasionally, one of you would rise high enough to be recorded. A queen, a mother of heirs, a patroness of the arts. But even those names were often filtered through the lens of the men they benefited. Their titles were appendages. Beloved of, consort to, mother of. The women who built the rhythm of palace life, who maintained its fragile pageantry, were never the ones credited with its stability. Still, you shaped the empire in ways no scroll could measure. You were part of the scent in its halls, the hush in its courtyards. You whispered warnings. You taught survival. You knew when to be still and when to disappear. You were a strategist cloaked in silks, a historian without parchment, a witness to power who was never allowed to speak of it. And yet, you saw. And you remembered. Maybe your story lived on in a servant girl who once saw you weep, or in a line of poetry misattributed to a nobleman. Maybe someone remembered your voice, or the way you arranged jasmine flowers in a bowl just before monsoon season. Maybe one of your whispered lullabies was passed down without your name attached. And maybe that's how most stories like yours survive. Fragmented, borrowed, echoed by people who never knew your face but still carry your shape. The empire is gone now. The palaces remain, but they are museums, hollowed of the politics, stripped of the whispers, scrubbed of the women who once haunted the shadowed rooms. Tourists walk through the Zenana with audio guides, marvelling at the carvings, the symmetry, the grandeur. They ask questions about architecture and warfare. No one asks who lived in the tiny chamber behind the screen. No one asks who braided whose hair. No one asks which woman sat by that window each evening, humming a melody only she knew. But we know, not the names, not the dates, something deeper, the outline, the pattern, the ache, the quiet strength it takes to live an entire life in silence. Not because you chose it, but because you refuse to let it crush you. History doesn't remember you, but it was built on your back. And somewhere in the way the stories still echo through the corridors, in the way a certain tile is worn smooth, or a garden corner blooms just right in spring, you remain. You are not a name on a monument. You are not a face in a fresco. You are not etched into official accounts or praised in scholarly texts. But your story is real, and in the end, that may be the only kind of immortality that matters. Because the palace tried to forget you, and still, here you are. That's the end of tonight's slow descent through the silken prison of the Mughal Harem, a world of jasmine-scented shadows, quiet rivalries, and lives reduced to whispers, behind carved screens. Thanks for drifting through history with me. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which part of harem life would have unravelled you first. The waiting, the watching, or the slow realisation that even your name was never really yours. Sleep well.